Hello and welcome to CADENZA. When I was very young, Christmas music was a big deal. I liked Christmas music. The variety of musical styles, moods, and presentations seemed never ending and completely covered the spectrum from the sacred to the secular. That's when I was young. Decades later, when you start hearing Christmas music in July and it's the same songs on super high rotation, it's easy to get jaded, and it offers up many potential candidates for my exclusive list of songs I never have to hear again in my lifetime. Yes, that list exists. And yes, there are two Christmas songs on it currently. As I said, it's exclusive. The objective is to be very deliberate in deciding what goes on that list because it's probably for life, and I love music. So while some may dispute my choices, the songs on the list have well earned their place there. In our house, we had these record albums that reflected a wide variety of carols. I don't recall our having many albums by one artist exclusively. The Bing Crosby Christmas album, maybe, that sticks out. But the majority were these collection records. They were big during the 1960s and 70s, where different stores and various companies like Goodyear and Firestone peddled annual Christmas albums, usually for cheap, like $1. You can probably find some of these gems in your local thrift stores and resale shops today. In the case of Goodyear, the LPs were said to be the idea of Stanley Arnold, a music industry consultant who approached the company in 1961 with the idea of a premium record. And while the company had its doubts initially, the albums were a big hit. In the first year, they sold out 100,000 pressings they released by Thanksgiving. The following year, they sold 200,000 copies and had to limit customers to one per visit. By 1966, Goodyear alone sold 15 million such albums for folks to enjoy. And these weren't, copycat acts. These were the big stars of the day doing original recordings. They saved the copycat stuff for the kids' records. In our house, the parents played their fancy holiday collection records from Firestone and Fave Drugs and the like, while us kids had kid records with a different mix. Very similar songs in a way, but not with the star power of the other records. One of them was Woody the Woodchuck Christmas Sing-Along album from 1960, which was an obvious take on Alvin and the Chipmunks, who were introduced in 1958. The album used sped-up voices for the songs, which were made to sound like the Chipmunks, but instead of being Alvin, Simon, and Theodore, they wanted us to envision and embrace the Woodchuck gang, Woody, Milty, and Chuck. Animal characters that we never heard from much before that, and I'm fairly certain we haven't heard much from them since. The album even featured the Chipmunk song, Christmas Don't Be Late, which was a #1 song on the Billboard Top 100 for 2 weeks in 1958, and it won 3 Grammy Awards. The nerve! My record was Children's Christmas Favorites by the Carolier Singers and Orchestra, released on the Peter Pan label, which was manufactured by the Synthetic Plastics Company in 1960. The record came out a few years before my time, but still, it was a decent enough collection. And I still have some fondness for some of those tunes and how they were presented because when I was little, well, that's what we had, and that made an impression. I could do a whole program alone on the harrowing Nuttin For Christmas, which was included in this collection. If you're not familiar, the main character of the song laments the likelihood of not getting anything for Christmas because of the bad things he did throughout the year. The lead-off offense being, I broke my bat on Johnny's head. And then he was pissed because somebody reported that activity and he got in trouble. Those were tough days, folks. All that violence aside, my favorite tune from the album was Wait for the Wagon on Christmas Day. It was the faster, more rollicking selection of the bunch, and because this was an LP, when you shifted the speed on the record player from 33 1/3 RPMs to 45 RPMs, it was even faster and more rollicking. And then you had a party. If on the rare occasion it got bumped to 78 RPMs, well, that was just a little too much for minds to process, and it just became anarchy. This is a joy that children of today probably aren't very aware of. With my limited sphere of experience at the time, I had no idea that we were actually listening to a version of a 100-plus-year-old Civil War song that was modified into a Christmas carol merely by adding one word, Christmas. Who knew that's all it took? If you get some time this holiday season, try adding the word Christmas to a song to see if you can create a new carol for the ages. Wait for the Wagon, as it was originally titled, was first published in 1850, but there is evidence that the song or variations of it existed before that formal publishing date. They were all pretty much the same tune, but differed by title, lyrics, and messaging. From what I can tell, the Wait for the Wagon on Christmas Day from my record seems to pattern after a version published in 1851 called Wait for the Wagon Ethiopian Song, which is attributed to George P. Knopf. There is not much to indicate why it was the Ethiopian version. Years earlier, George Knopf, a Virginia music teacher, created a compendium of popular at the time songs and fiddle tunes called the Virginia Reels. When comparing lyrics between the 1851 version and the 1960 carol, the only thing that changed was the aforementioned addition of the word Christmas into the song's chorus, mostly. The carol uses only the first two verses of the song, which talk about the mountains and rivers and the wind and food and all that nice stuff. The next set of verses in the real song center around a man who has a thing for a last name Phyllis, but she seems involved with an older man named Mike. The younger man tries to woo her away from Mike and all of Mike's wealth, offering instead his youth and health. Odder still is that a year later, in 1852, a reply song was published, which was called The Answer to Wait for the Wagon, which has Phyllis telling the young guy, who is now named Jacob, that she is going to follow the man with the pelf, or money, because as the lyrics go, your wagon is so clumsy and your team so very slow. Then she finishes him off with a chorus dissing Jacob about his ego, his vision of what he sees in her, and his old rusty wagon. You go, girl. You can see where the kids might find all this confusing, not being related to any holiday at all. Best to just pilfer the first two verses, toss in Christmas, and call it a day. It might be lazy writing. It might be inspired genius. But the simplicity moves an old song forward while helping to keep things from getting weird, for the kids. So let's give it a go. Wait for the Wagon on Christmas Day.